Welcome to today's webinar on virtual and in-person presentation tips for IT leaders and professionals. I'm Eric Bloom. I'm the Executive Director of the IT Management and Leadership Institute. I won't spend too much time on my background other to say that, well, you can see it here. I've written a number of books. I'm a CIO by background, was nationally syndicated. One thing I'm proud to say, actually, that I've begun to do again is I'm starting to write once again for CIO.com. My column is Developing IT Leaders. We have the first, I think, 2 or 3 columns out there. It's free for you, so just feel free to Google Eric Bloom, CIO.com. If you Google just my name, you'll either get me or a really cool looking rock musician. Obviously, I'm the other guy. Anyway, welcome, and let's move into today's materials. Let's begin by talking about the presentation preparation. This in many ways is where your presentation will succeed or fail based on what your business objectives are related to the presentation. The first thing that you need to look into and understand and really analyze is who is the audience? What's their organizational level? Obviously, I'm assuming presentations within the office, those presentations being either physically in person or certainly virtual. In some cases, what we're beginning to see a lot of is they're hybrid. Where you'll have some people, you might physically be in the office with a few people, but many others may be connected electronically, so to speak. But the first is, what's their organizational level? Or most particularly, what's their organizational level compared to your organizational level? In other words, if they're your management, then probably you're going to have to prepare a little bit more than if it's the people who are working in your team, those in your staff, and they customers, etc. But what's their organizational level? Next. There we go, is what's their knowledge of the topic? In other words, are you the true subject matter expert on this, or are these topics that they're familiar with also? Because the more you know about it, in fact, these two will tie very closely to what's called situational influence. In other words, is that organizationally, do you have the power or do they have the power? From a knowledge perspective, do you know more than them, the same, or less? All of these will really help give you a good indication of your level of preparation, the value of this presentation for you, etc. The next is their professional discipline. The reason that that's important is, say you have someone from finance. They're probably going to be asking you questions at the end and will be very interested on the return of it, the return on investment. What's the expenses going to be? What's the run rate for your project? Should it be related in that way? If it's someone sales oriented, they may be more interested in, gee, how can they use this to, well, increase their commissions, help them sell more product, etc. If it's human resources based, then each organization within, each group within the organization has its own what they call microculture. So the better you understand what their professional discipline is, the easier it will be not only for you to tune your presentation to meet the needs of those in the audience, but also to begin to assess what kind of questions you may be getting after the fact. Next is in the room reporting structure. In other words, who reports to who? I'm just going to use a couple of the names here. So let's say that there are 3 of us in the room. Myself, I report to Sandra, and Sandra reports to Kerry. So if the 3 of us are there and you're presenting to us, then the one you need to know the most about is Kerry. The reason is I might love your presentation. I may want to buy your product. I may want to support your project. But if my boss's boss, Kerry, hates it, then chances are it isn't going to happen. So by you knowing that, if you can't figure it out ahead of time, you can learn that just by watching the people in the room, the body language. Like, for example, if I say something, I think that this has some merit. What do you think, Kerry? Then probably that means that Kerry's my boss, rather than me saying, yes, I think this is really great. And I have a feeling that Sandra and Kerry agree. Would that be right? So if you see by the turn of phrase, by the body language, by the tone of voice, etc., if you can't figure this out ahead of time, then you can certainly while, in the room or even on video. Next is friends and foes. Who in the room likes you and who in the room doesn't like you. If you really want to know the difference of this, then watch any time that you can watch the Senate or the House, at the federal level, interviewing or, getting information from a person, sitting out there, whoever it might be, whatever the topic. I'm not going to get into politics. The same thing happens when it's this side or when it's that side. It doesn't matter. But it's very clear by the questions they ask, by the tone of their voice, etc., who are the friends and foes. So in the meetings, who are going to be your friends and foes, who's going to help you succeed, and who may make it a little bit more challenging for you. Next is who will benefit or hurt by your proposal. Let's assume, of course, that your presentation is proposal-based, say to gain funding or prioritization or whatever it is for project. Who will gain from it and who will lose? And that will also, by the way, add a little bit to give you more insights into, in this particular case, who are your friends and foes within the meeting. The next is who's forced to be there. In other words, they were told to go to the meeting, and who wants to be there. Because you know what? If you have a bunch of people, particularly if it's physically in the room, but even if it's virtual, is that if they're there, doing the thumb dance on their phone and they're not really paying attention, it sort of sucks the energy out of the room for you. So if at all possible, if you can figure out who doesn't want to be there, maybe you can find a way to get them not invited. Next, past successes or challenges that you have had with these particular audience members. Do they generally like your stuff? Do they generally not like it? What kind of questions do they ask? And so on. And also the dynamics between those within the room. I'll give you an example of this. Is very, very early in my career. It was actually right after I got my MBA. I was working for actually Booz Allen and Hamilton. Awesome company. It was a great way for me to sort of learn about business. But anyways, I was making my first presentation in front of the clients, and there were two clients in the room. I won't mention who the client was, but they hated each other. And my boss was actually in the back of the room in the middle. It's my first presentation. It wasn't a senior crowd for the most part. I mean, it was, again, my first presentation to this client, to any client. So what happened was this person on the left says, so Eric, what do you think about blah, blah, blah from this perspective? And I go, well, I think that it could be done this way. And then someone in the other room goes, yeah, Eric, but what do you think about it from that perspective? And the two of them went back and forth, just firing questions at me. My boss is sort of in the back, like just sort of letting it go. And he had like this little funny smile on his face. So then at the end of it, I'm thinking I'm failing. I'm thinking it's going awful. So afterwards, I went up to my boss and I said, oh, I apologize. I mean, these people were firing questions to me left and right. And he said to me, they weren't talking to you, didn't you? I said, well, what do you mean? Those questions for you were for fodder because the two of them were fighting against each other, and you just happen to be the one in the front of the room. You actually handled it pretty well. Congratulations. But next time, you maybe want to understand the room dynamics a little better. So, there are certainly that's an exception. That's I've never seen something quite like that again through my career, but it just happened to be the first time. So anyway, understand the dynamics between the different people that are sitting there. Next is, what does your audience want? The first one is sort of who they are and that kind of stuff. This is presumably they're in the meeting for some actual business purpose. What is the reason that they're there? Is they want to make a decision. Maybe should they support or not support your project? Do they just want to learn something of interest about maybe a new technology? Are they preparing for action? In other words, they want to learn new skills. They want information. They want to know what's going on so that they can do something that's on their list of goals or objectives to move forward. Do they want to receive just a project update? Like, oh, all right, cool, project's going pretty well, kind of thing. Do they want to help you succeed? Very often you'll have people, back to the friends and foes, who are really there to help you. For example, if your boss is in the room, then your boss may be interjecting, maybe talking a little bit to others in the room, answering or asking you a question, asking you the type of question that, as they say, would be a layup, meaning that it'd be really easy for you to answer, and it's something that your boss feels would be great for you to say to the room. Do they want to stop you from succeeding? They may like you personally, but hey, they hate that new project that's going to be implementing because they feel that it would detract somehow from their professional responsibility, their job type, or their staff, or something along that line. Or they have some way for personal gain. They just want to be seen in the presentation. So what will happen is that they will elaborate on the things you're saying to just tell the crowd in the room how smart they are on the topic. So you'll say blah, blah, blah. And then they'll say, yes, actually, that's really interesting, Eric. Have you thought about it from this perspective and that perspective? How I view this is this way. So they're almost trying to take some of your, I want to say glory if you're doing the presentation, but they want to take sort of some of the air in the room to themselves to show some type of personal gain contained within it. Next is it's your goals. All right, we've been talking about them. What about you? You're giving a presentation. You should be able to get something from it yourself. Let me see. I just got a question. Will there be a, let me see. Hello, there will be, Will there be a certificate of attendance? Let me say that there isn't specifically one that we give for this, but should you want a certificate of attendance, certainly just email me. My email address will be at the end, and we can get you one of those. Particularly, actually, I should say to anyone, if this should be accepted for most PDUs. I know that our material has continually been accepted for PMI, as well as I believe many other organizations. I believe that people have submitted it to SHRM and to a few others. So if you need that, again, just let me know. To make it easy, the email is eric.bloom, ERIC, at, obviously, the itmlinstitute.org. But great, thank you for asking, Stephanie. I appreciate it. So anyway, back to this. What are your goals for the presentation? First of all, is do you want them to approve to perform an action? In other words, yes, move ahead with your project. Do you want to make a sale? And maybe you're in a sales type situation of some sort. Now, whether that's a real sale, for dollars coming into the company, or maybe you're selling yourself in trying to get a new job. To enhance customer or client loyalty or satisfaction. To advance a business initiative that you're trying to move forward, to improve, to provide information or status, say, for example, on a state of your project, or just something along those lines. And if those are your business goals, then what's your professional goals? It could be to enhance your professional brand for those in the room, or just increase your potential for a promotion. It could also be to gain new supporters and new contacts. Now, in fact, one of my goals here is hopefully that you will, just because every presentation has goals, I don't think there's any secret that I have two goals here. One of which is I really love to give back to the IT community. So I'm hoping that people truly find this of value to enhance their own careers and their own job performance, in this case, in relation certainly to presentations. But a business goal of mine beyond that is I hope that from here, you're saying, gee, it looks like they're a good organization. And maybe you or those you work with would like to sign up for one of our IT, MLP, or MLEs. I didn't say that actually as a marketing thing. It's that you should know, what are your goals? In other words, get my project approved, get my money, and so on, whatever it might be, money for your project and so on. The reason is because that will change. If you have a particular goal in mind, it will change subtly the words that you're using, the way that you're answering questions that are asked, always making sure it's towards whatever your goal is. Now, also just one other thing on goal before I move forward. And is that as you know, I'm a senior executive by background. But so let's say, who should I pick on here? I'll pick on Carolyn, if I may. So let's say that Carolyn is a couple of organizational levels down from me. Maybe I'm an SVP, you're a director. If I use another example, Carolyn, I'll make you like the CIO and I'll report to you. How's that? But anyway, so let's say that Carolyn is making a presentation and I'm physically in the room or on virtually, but the reason I'm in the meeting is because maybe I'm one of 3 or 4 people who will approve or disapprove the project to be given continued funding. Now, if that's the case, certainly I'm there for that reason. But as a senior manager, what am I also doing? And I think most, not all, but most senior managers will also do this, either specifically knowing that they're doing it or just subliminally doing it, is that I'll be watching Carolyn's presentation and thinking, gee, is Carolyn maybe, a future high potential within our organization? Gee, Carolyn is a project manager, and I know that the PMO, the VP in charge of the PMO is going to be moving to another position in January. I wonder if Carolyn could be a great candidate to head up the new PO and give her a promotion out of it. So always when you're speaking to people, if they're a senior staff, always have one of your goals to enhance your professional brand in the mind of the people that are there, because they're thinking about it. They're evaluating you, beyond just the reason you're giving the presentation, because it's so, so important for senior managers or even first-time managers of all levels to be able to assess who can take their role and who can be moved up in the organization and given more responsibility. Now it's what do you want them to do? So it's sort of who they are and all that about them. What are your goals? All right, well, as part of your goals, what do you want them to do? Do you want them, how should they react to your presentation? It might be to approve your proposal. Yes, that is a great project to implement a new CRM system. Where do I sign to make sure that you get the funding you need? It might be to buy a product and service if you're more on the, say, sales side of the house. It could be just to react positively to you and your topic, like, as if it's sort of preparation for a bigger deal. Like, wow, a cloud-based architecture would be a good thing to move toward. You know what? Maybe we should just have future presentations moving in that direction. And in my group in charge of app dev, it'd be really good for me to look toward that as a potential future. So if you get the idea, is that, what do you want their reaction to be? Maybe you want them to be inspired. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry about that. I didn't want to do it on camera, but obviously I'm back. But anyway, do you want to inspire them or do you want to outrage them? Because sometimes you'll say, for example, back to the cloud-based architecture. This would be a great thing for us to move to, all of you development managers out there that are in this meeting. Or it could be outrage. I can't believe this vendor is doing this to us. We've been working with this vendor for 15 years, but what I think we strongly should do is we should consider moving away from this vendor and finding another person to basically be giving our companies good money to because of this. So, what do you want? You want them to be outrageous, say, oh my God, yes, we can't use that vendor anymore. Or maybe it's just simply passively agree. Maybe what you really want to do is you really just want to get in there. You want to give your status report. You don't want to make any waves. If people are falling asleep in the meeting because you're the fifth of six status reports they're going to be seeing, absolutely, give them a nice pasta lunch right before it's your turn to present, because you just want to get out of it without any waves and move forward. The next thing is I alluded to this earlier, you need to understand your situational understanding and influence. In other words, comparing your relative position in regard to your knowledge on the topic. Take someone, for example, who's a brain surgeon. I'll go outside of our IT market. When someone who's a brain surgeon is talking to, say, people who are general practitioners in medicine, oh my God, they know everything there is about brain surgery, and they're all paying attention. Why? Because this person is the wizard in the room. Let's say that same brilliant brain surgeon is speaking at a brain surgery conference where everyone knows what brain surgery is. All right, it's going to be everyone knows as much to them about the topic, so they can't say, oh, I'll just talk about sort of generally what it is. They better have an angle or something, or everyone will be sitting there like, yeah, we all know this. What are you speaking for? So that will help you gauge the level of detail. Also, by the way, if you're talking to a general audience, the material you present needs to be at a higher level because they won't understand the nuances of the things you're talking about. Also, every profession, every sub-profession has its own acronyms and turns of phrase. So though, that brain surgeon, we're talking to other brain surgeons, could use words and things related to brain surgery that, let me just say, me as one of the unwashed masses in that regard, wouldn't have a clue what he's talking about. So it will help you gauge in that perspective. But also, the professional level or professional stature of those in the room. Those together will also help you define the power balance. In other words, do you have the power in the room, or do they have the power in the room? If they're the ones who will be approving your project, then it's them. If you're the one making a presentation to, say, peers, or you're just speaking at a conference and giving people information, or it's people in your staff, then it's you. Also, the quality of your presentation. This is something you should understand. In other words, is this, this could go in a couple of different ways. What's your level of preparation along with it? In other words, let's say, for example, that this is a presentation I just learned that morning. I had to do that afternoon, and I said, well, all right, I just whipped together some slides. The quality of it, it's okay. It's not the best presentation I did. Or is it one that you have been working on and tweaking for weeks? So what's the quality of it? What's it going to look like? What are the level of graphics? Does it all have the same font size? That kind of stuff. And your level of preparation. Let's say it's on a topic that you just know cold. Maybe your doctoral thesis, should you have one. I don't have a doctorate, but if you do, I'll be impressed. But that it was on your doctoral thesis. You don't have to do a lot of background on this. You can dig deep on what the topic is. Let's say, for example, your specialty is data communication, and you've designed half a dozen different data centers and how it all connects in. And you're talking to a group saying, hey, how should we What should we do from a communications an infrastructure perspective regarding datacom? So there, your level of knowledge of it is very high. Your level of presentation, maybe you've given before. So these are just good things for you to know, going into it, but also the importance of the topic to you. There'll be times like, for example, let's say for your department, the senior vice president of sales is going to be making a presentation at your department. Why? Because you're going to be implementing the CRM system, the new CRM system. So it's you and maybe half a dozen other programmers, maybe a couple of business analysts, a couple of others in the room. The senior vice president looks at his calendar and says, "Oh yeah, I'm presenting to these guys lunchtime. Okay, hey, I hope they have a kind of pizza I like. Let me see what I should talk about. Yeah, I'll talk about this, and this. That'll be good." They walk in, they know their topic. They basically may just be talking and have no formal presentation. And how important is it to them? They want to check the box, basically, that that person came in and presented to you. And also the importance of the topic to the audience, because will they be sitting on every word that you're saying? Will you see them, like even on video, sort of looking down a lot? You can sort of tell they have a pencil in hand and they're writing down everything you're saying. Or is it just sort of cool to know? Or do they not have to be there at all, but it's a good place to be seen? So they just sit there and smile, and then, below the camera level, what they're doing is they're basically answering questions on their phone or dropping an email out or two. These are, again, good things for you to know because it's all situationally. Every meeting you're in, the situation will be slightly different. And also, what's your credibility with those in the room? In other words, say you're a project manager and your last 4 projects, you just nailed it. They went 100%. You were it was well received by those that needed to adopt that new technology. You came in on time, on budget. Maybe there were 2 or 3 people out there in the audience that you've actually implemented those projects for. You have extremely high credibility. Or maybe you're a consultant from the outside, but you get the idea. The more credible you are, the easier it is for you to take command of the room. Next is your personal strengths and weaknesses. We all have them, certainly me included, to say the least. But think of yourself, all right, how good am I at this stuff? What's your public speaking ability? Do you love giving presentations, or do you hate it and you never do it and you hope it goes well? And it's just sort of, let me say, outside your professional comfort zone. What's your depth of knowledge of the topic? When you go in to give the presentation, are you praying that no one tries to make you dig down a level or two? Because you don't really, you know it at the top, but you don't really, like you're doing a project update. And you know where things stand, but if they start digging into the detail, you're sort of lost a little bit. Or is it something that you could just dig into the weeds as deep as you want? The next is your experience giving similar presentations. Is that the more you've given presentations like this, for example, what this is actually, it's an excerpt of a full day class that I don't even know how many times I've given. So I feel that I have pretty good experience, and I hope you feel the same, on delivering this type of material. Next is your ability to control the room. Part of your ability to control the room ties very specifically to your public speaking ability. There are things you can do, regardless of the people who are organizationally sitting there, an amount of knowledge and so on. If you know how to run the room, is that you can keep control, even if people, are of higher organizational levels or know more. It's by your presence. It's by the things you do. I'll give you a perfect example of it. Who was it that I said that I was going to make my boss or a senior person next time? It was Carolyn. Okay. So let's say Carolyn is the CEO of the company. How's that? Did I do better? Okay, good. So Carolyn is the senior vice president of the company. She stands right here, somewhere, say at the front of the room around a table. All right, good. I'm glad she says, yes, that's good. And she says, all right, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Eric Bloom. He's going to be talking about X. Then where am I going to stand? How am I going to control the room? And this is just one of many, many tips that falls under this category. I'm going to stand exactly where Carolyn stood. Why? Because this is the position of power, because she stood here. It's called, it's physical representation or physical space. So by me standing exactly where she stood, I will get some of the delegated authority from her to me. Instead, if I stood over here, then it's just somewhere different. It's another person, but that's the place where the power is. So those things you can learn over time. There are many, many, many other tips and tricks that go along with that. Also, understand the technology that's being used. How well do you understand it? For some people, probably, I would assume that since we're the IT Management Leadership Institute, you probably know something about IT and, well, technology. So you may feel much more comfortable using technology to deliver, whether that's Zoom, WebEx, Adobe Connect, Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. You'll know some better than others. For example, is that myself, I'm very strong on Zoom and a couple of the others. But if I'm doing WebEx, I can do it as a user. But for example, if there's going to be breakout sessions, then I'll want to have an engineer on it who specializes in WebEx production. Why? Because I can do it, but I'm really clunky at it. So I wouldn't want it to take away from the presentation. But also, if you're doing it in person, do you know how the lavalier works? How do you turn it on and off? How do you adjust the volume? How's the microphone work? The overhead projector, how do you turn it so that your screens go on? These are all things that you shouldn't have to worry about the day of the presentation. It should be part of your preparation to figure out. And also your comfort with the venue. If it's in a conference room you've never been in before, say in your building, or you're speaking physically at a conference that's in a hotel or something. What I always do is I always go in at least a couple of hours. If I flew there, I'll go in there the night before. I'll go to where the stage is. I'll stand on it. I'll sort of get an idea of where people will be sitting, just so you don't walk in or get in even in on to the venue, even if it's electronic, and go, all right, now how do I share my screens? You should do that stuff ahead of time. Now let's talk about the presentation delivery. So, you've done all your prep, and now the time has come. The first thing you want to do is practice. After you've practiced it, what you want to do is practice. And then after you've practiced it, guess what you want to do? Practice it some more. Practice makes perfect. But now the idea behind it, though, is that there's different ways to practice. What you want to do is you want to practice it out loud. And you want to practice, if it's going to be on video or even just video it right on your cell phone, and then watch it yourself. And how many people have I said that now and you're cringing, you're going, ooh, I hate to watch myself on video, or I hate to hear my own audio, because, we are very, me too, we can be very, very critical of our own delivery. But the thing is, you can learn a lot from it. And as the joke goes, is, well, you should watch yourself on video because you've subjected all of us to watching you on video. That's just sort of, like an inside joke related to that. But you learn a lot about your presentation skills and your ability to deliver. The next is, be careful of mental practice. I know I used to do this and I was steered away from it. You can still do it at the beginning, but don't just do that. What I mean by mental practice, and see if this has happened to anybody, where you're sitting back and you're going through your slides and say, all right, on slide 1, I'll say this. On slide 2, I'll say that. Oh, on slide 3, I'm going to read that bullet point on this one. On slide 4, oh, I should say this on slide 4. Yeah, on slide 5, I'm going to do this. So that's mental practice. That has limited value to you. Why? Because when you say it, it sounds different. Than thinking about how you're going to say it is different than actually saying it. So practice it with actually saying the words, and you can do that again. Just video yourself on your cell phone and see how it sounds. Practice it a few times. Also, practice with your prompts. For example, what I mean by that is that if you're going to have different things like this, when I talk about vendor management, one of the things that I do is I talk about the difference between buying pencils and buying pens. So just make sure that your prompts are there, whatever else that you may have related to it. A lot of that's more if you're in the room. There aren't too many props most people use if they're in a virtual world. Next is practice standing up as if it was real. I'll be honest with you, I am standing up right now. Every time I give a presentation or even a virtual class. Why am I standing up? Well, because it allows me to have a little bit more movement. It allowed me earlier to do this, versus that. It lets me use my hands more correct. And I believe that I can present higher level of energy than if I'm sitting on the sofa and leaning back, as I'm giving the presentation. So as a result, that's something that I do that you should consider also. By the way, is that I'm also standing up if I'm on an important call with a stakeholder or, something along that line for the same reason. Next is practice on the software that's being used. So in other words, is that if you're great at Zoom and this one is going to be on Teams, get in there, practice it, learn what the buttons are. How do you do the little bit of animation on it? Should you be doing that? And also, the audience practice process is that what you want to do is, if it's not for all presentations, but if it's a really important one, practice it in front of a few people. If you go, or you can video yourself, you watch it, but then let other people see the video and say, hey, how did I do? That kind of thing. And say, oh, you talked about that, or, you said you were going to talk about this and you didn't. Get basically feedback. And then just like when washing your hair, wash, rinse, and repeat. Try it again, until you can, basically get it smooth in your turn of phrase and such, etc. Next, just before the presentation begins, okay? So this would have been for me at, let me see, 11:45 Eastern time. So just 15 minutes. I did a lot of this stuff too, okay? First of all is use visualization to build confidence. So that I know, I don't do this one, but I know actually motivational speakers, this is when they speak in person. I don't know if they do it in video, but I assume they would. But what they do is before they go on stage, they'll actually go into the restroom and they'll use power poses. So they'll just imagine that they're in the restroom here, presumably is that no one else is in there, or they sort of look like an idiot. But anyway, they'll look into the mirror and go, and why do they do that? Because your body language can actually affect your mood and your emotion. We all know it works the other way, but it works that way too. So he doesn't want to walk on stage like this and say, yeah, hi, I'm your motivational speaker. He wants to walk on stage using all the right body language and everything. So that's how he uses, a lot of them use visualization. I actually said to him, as I said, well, what if you go in the restroom, there's other people there, do you do the same stuff? Doesn't it look sort of weird? And he says, well, if anyone is in the restroom, he doesn't do it. What he'll do is find a quiet closet, make believe he can see himself doing it. But also, adjust your body language and posture. Are you sitting back on the chair kind of thing? Because again, if your body language, or let me say your posture and your physicality doesn't match the level of energy that you're trying to present to others, then this can be a big issue for you. Why? Because you have an incongruity between your mind and your body. If you want to try this one out after the webinar ends, curl up on the sofa, like you're going to be taking a nap, and then try to sound really excited. It takes like 5 times the energy, and it doesn't do it because your mind is going, you're not that excited. Look, you look like you're going to fall asleep like a couch potato under a sofa at 10:30 at night. So actually, just your posture can have an enormous advantage. Next is look in the mirror before you go on camera and just make sure, the old like spinach in your teeth kind of thing. Test your software and equipment before you do so, before it begins. I have a watch that's right in front of me. And then when I give my presentations, I put a little time at each page to know am I a little bit ahead or behind. And I'll use that basically to speed up or slow down earlier in my presentation as needed. I'll review my materials. If there were any handouts, I'll make sure I know where they are in a virtual world so I can properly add them to chat. I'll review any notes that I have. And also, as funny as it sounds, make sure you use the restroom. The last thing you want to do is 1 minute into a 1-hour presentation, be thinking, oh my God, I should have gone to the restroom beforehand. I am stuck standing here for an hour, whether you need to go or not. Forgive me for raising a subject like that, but it is enormously important for me to share that piece of knowledge with you. Not for me, but for you. The next one is when does your presentation begin? It actually begins, if it's physical, the second you walk in the room. Because people are going to be, oh yeah, that's the speaker. And, they're going to be looking at you, observing you before you even start speaking. If it's in a virtual, it's as soon as the session begins. So let's say, for example, that you're sitting, that you're going to be presented, you're one of 10 people on a Zoom screen, you're sitting there, you're not paying attention, you're yawning, maybe you're talking to somebody while someone else is talking. People are looking at that. So you should be giving whoever's speaking prior to you, maybe it's just in your introduction or whatnot. When you sit down, you should be, use the proper body language, things along that line. Like in video, what's the difference between this, and this? Generally speaking, from a body language perspective, that means, oh my God, I am bored to sin. I am listening, I am thinking. I'm even pointing at my brain. I'm thinking about what the person is saying. Or, I'm really listening. So if you're bored to death, what are you going to do? You're going to start to go like this and then just roll the fingers under and go this way. So what you're doing is you're giving other speakers or others basically the same respect that you hope you're getting. And they're going, well, this guy just not really interested in anybody else. It's easy for people to evaluate you prior to your speaking beginning. Next, observe the conversations or body language in the room with others. Do they look really bored, or what are you going to, how are you going to gauge how they feel about your presentation? If someone looks really mad, maybe you want to ask them a question. You want to engage them in it, see if you can get them on your side, that kind of thing. Smile when you introduce yourself. There's a big difference between, hi, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm glad you're here for today's webinar. My name is Eric Bloom, versus, hi, my name is Eric Bloom. Yeah, I'm doing a webinar the next hour. I hope you're as excited about this topic as I am. Very different between those two. So always be evaluating yourself, and we'll be talking about that one a little bit more. Also, be yourself. Don't try to be a manufactured version of yourself. It just doesn't work, or at least it doesn't work for me. But show confidence, because if you don't believe what you're delivering, is factual and you know what you're doing, why should anybody else? Also is what I like to do is scope out the room. This one is for more physical, but I'll say, is there a clock or a timer? I actually always do that. I have a watch right in front of me that I can again look down. I think I mentioned that before. What's the layout? What are the microphone types? Where are your notes as compared to being on the stage? I have this ritual that I do where I always put my notes right in front of me that I'm using. I always have a pencil. I got a piece of paper in case someone asks a question that I want to write down. It's actually called nesting, where you make sure that everything is where you need it to be. The next is watching your audience. Watch their body language, their level of engagement, the decision makers' participation. Back to that thing, if I reported to Sandy, and I think it was Sandy reported to Kerry, what's Kerry thinking about on this? Because one beautiful thing, actually, if you're on video, is you can be looking, if 15 people are on the screen, they don't know who you're looking at. I mean, physically in a meeting, if we're in a meeting, I can't be going like this and, and be like staring at Kerry the whole time while we're talking if she's the senior executive in the room. All right. But in video, no one will know who you're looking at in it. So it gives you actually a little bit of an edge in that regard in gaining a deeper understanding and monitoring the people who are most important to you. Level of confusion or understanding that they have on your topic. Are they on the cell phone? Are they doing the old laptop activity, etc.? Now, in addition to watching them, you also need to be paying attention to yourself. What's the volume, pacing, intonation, emphasis that you're doing? In other words, if you're really nervous giving the presentation, then what you'll probably start to do is you'll probably start to talk really, really fast. The reason you want to talk really, really fast is who wants to do things that they really don't like doing? You want to get it done faster and be able to get off camera and let somebody else talk. Now, so if you start doing that, you'll get your 10-minute presentation done in like a minute and a half. And then you'll sit down and go, wow, that was a lot less than when I practiced it. But what will happen is it will come across very differently to, if it's too fast of a pace or whatnot, it can hurt you professionally, actually, because the viewing, they can tell that you're mad or you have, not mad, I'm sorry, that you're nervous or that you have very little experience speaking in front of a group, or you don't have the confidence in yourself to be able to do it well. So really watch your own tone of voice and so on. The next one is your movement. Is a lot of people, and the reason you should watch yourself on video, I know speakers who, will have certain idiosyncrasies that they have when they speak. Imagine that, that for the whole hour, I was going back and forth like I am now. I would either put you to sleep, I would hypnotize you. It would be a little bit like watching a ping pong match from the side, or what men will often do if it's physically in a room. They have their hand in their pocket. They'll, like, if they have keys or change, they'll be jiggling it a little bit and making some noise. So watch your own movements. The next is monitor your language. Your sentence length, your structure, the words that you're using, that the words you're using, if it's industry-based, for example, is that, let's say you're speaking to someone outside your company, another group, and the company that you're speaking to, say it's a client, that they refer to their, like, for example, credit unions generally refer to their customers as members. Other, law firms generally refer to their customers as clients. Retail establishments generally refer to their customers as well, customers. So make sure that you're using the right words and such based on the audience you are. Next is you want to engage your audience. You don't want to be up there and have them watch and have them look like this. And you can even see when they're doing stuff like this in video, because one of the worst things they can say is, hey, how was the presentation? Oh my God, it was like watching paint dry. So remember that you're the star of this. It's not your PowerPoint slides. Use eye contact with people. A lot of people, what you'll see is, I have my camera directly above where I see myself. So as a result, I can make sure I'm staying in the middle of the screen. What a lot of people, if they have two screens, say a laptop, and they have an attached a second screen, and their presentation is up on the second screen, then what they'll do is you'll be seeing the side of their head the whole time. You have no contact, they'll have no eye contact with you. Why? Because they're looking at the presentation right now. If you've ever seen anyone do that, it just hurts your professional brand in having done it. You want to involve the audience with questions if it makes sense to do so. Be respectful of all those in the room. By the way, humans make plans and God laughs. There's some construction I heard going on in the building, so forgive me if you hear an electric drill or something along the way. Don't read your slides word for word. Certainly you want to go through them, but just don't say slide 1 is this, bullet point 2 is this, bullet point 3 is this. Avoid being negative. Sometimes you'll get someone in the audience who will sort of want you to go negative. Whenever you do, they win and you lose, almost by definition. Now, when it ends, you also need to be ready to answer questions and answers. How do you do the Q&A? You may want to plant some seeds that, in fact, they may find that you want other people to ask. So let's say, for example, who should I pick on? Rachel. Let's say that Rachel, you're making a presentation, and there's a couple of points that you really want to be brought up, but you know what? You don't want to raise them. So let's say, for example, we work together. Maybe I work for you. Maybe I'm on your team. Maybe I'm just a friend of yours. And you say, hey, Eric, if nobody asks any questions, will you ask this question to me? I'd really like to answer it. And so I just sort of sit there and, and say, oh yeah, I do have a quick question. If you would, yeah, sure. What? Blah blah blah. And then you look at me and not saying, thanks, Eric, for asking that question. What do you say? Great question. And then you think about it like you didn't know that question was coming, and then you answer it. Those are called seed questions. Also, a lot of people are afraid to be the first person to ask a question. So as a result of that, if you have 2 or 3 people that that you've said, hey, if nobody asks, let's prime the pump. And what they do is that they ask a couple of questions, and then the questions begin to come and flow more obvious. Also, try to anticipate the potential questions. Remember back from our very first slide is that if there's someone there from finance, they're going to want to know what the numbers are. So if you don't include, say, for example, the numbers directly in your presentation, what you want to do is that you want to at least have done your due diligence, maybe have a slide after your thank you slide that would say, that would bring up the numbers. So the finance person can say, yes, we didn't include that in the presentation, but I'm really glad you asked. And then you can go poof, and you can bring up that extra slide. That's just a great way to do something. Now, I'm going to give you a great tip. This is a PowerPoint tip. If you're using it, it only works in presentation mode. Let's say, for example, that right now I am on slide 18. I know that because I can see it in the second, it's not physically on this slide because I have a graphic in the way, but I can see it on my slide and I see it in my handouts. Let's say I want to go to slide 10 for a minute. I can say, as we reviewed on slide 10, blah, 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 blah. And now let's go back to where we were, but that was a great question you previously asked me. Isn't that a great trick? You don't have to go from slide to slide to slide. Or if you're running behind in your presentation and you just want to go to the thank you, the way you do it in presentation, the way in presentation mode only, is the way that this works is I knew what slide 10 was. So I put in, 1, 0, enter, like 10, enter. Then I wanted to get back to slide 18. I said 18, enter, and it brings me immediately back to that slide. So it doesn't look like you're bouncing around going from slide to slide, particularly if you're doing what I'm doing, where I'm feeding it one bullet point at a time. Oh my God, it could take you 5 minutes to get back and then 5 minutes to get forward. It's a great trick. Next one is unplanned questions. Listen carefully to what's being asked. Try to understand why they're asking the question. Because if you can understand the why, then it will give you some insights on how to answer it. Then when you're giving answers, answered obviously, clearly and concisely, but know when to purposely answer a different question. I'm going to go back to politicians for a moment, if I could, or you see this sometimes with sports figures or with other, like when they're interviewing senior executives about their companies. If they're well schooled and working with the press, is let's say you ask me a question that I don't want to answer, I'll just answer a different question. And research has shown if the people watching it are 100% focused on exactly what the question was, they'll think you asked the question because it was a different question, but you're avoiding. So know when to answer, when not to answer. Also know the level of which to answer. In other words, if a senior vice president asks you something, don't dig into the weeds. Why? Because they're probably not interested in it at the weed level, or may not understand it. They'd want to know it at a higher level. And also here, draw out the next question. In other words, if someone asks you a question, what you could say is, oh, that's great. Now, that brings up a good point. Was anyone thinking about a question on X? Yeah, okay, good. Well, let me move forward on that. That could also be a seed type question as hey, you didn't ask your seed question. That was a really good time. You could use it in that perspective also. So anyway, what I've been trying to do here is I've been trying to give you different tips on the preparation and the delivery of your presentations. But I like to call this the gift that keeps on giving. This is, I am paying forward advice that was given to me about a dozen years ago when I started doing more formalized speaking and so on, is when you see great things, don't just participate with the goal, observe with the goal of enhancing your personal skills. What I mean by that is, I presume you're here at this presentation because, well, you want to improve your presentation skills. That's why you came to the webinar. So I may be doing things that you like or things that you don't like. Certainly, I hope you followed along with all the bullet points and things we were talking about. But I don't know if you've noticed, I tend to talk with my hands. Now, for me to talk with my hands, I do it because I hope you feel it's more engaging. You may find it more engaging, or quite frankly, you may find it rather annoying. You could go either way. But let's say you go, oh, I really like the way he does that. Well, what are the things I have to do? I have to make sure that my camera goes from here to here. The reason is if I'm strictly here as a headshot, I'm moving my hands, but you can't see them now, so they're of no value to you. If on the other hand, you think, oh my God, he uses his hands, I just want a headshot, that is so annoying for me, then don't do it. So what you want to do is observe, be there to participate in whatever meeting or interpersonal activity it is, but observe other people's technique and bring them into your own. This works certainly when you're giving presentations, when you're if you're leading a conference call, that's some conference calls, everybody talks, some are really orchestrated well. How does that happen? When people are running meetings, when they're providing project status report, if you're in a meeting with 5 other people who are all presenting their project status to a senior manager, watch closely all the others and then say, gee, that person did a really good job. Wow, they use red, yellow, green lights, to say if the project's going well or not on their project. I really like that. So incorporate all that stuff into yourself. Don't copy them, but use it and understand what they're doing and find a way to make it your own. Also, negotiation. If you're negotiating with someone and they basically take you to the cleaners, when you walk away and going, oh my God, that didn't go well, the next question to ask yourself is, why didn't it go well? What techniques did they use that I could incorporate into my negotiation skills going forward? How do you say no without saying no? How do people deal with difficult situations that they've done, and how did you see that you could do it, etc. Sort of this list goes on and on. So what I'd like to just say now is that, as you're moving forward from this presentation, enhancing your presentation skills, it's neither an event, today here an event, or destination. I'm so good at this, I can just do it. It's a lifelong journey of learning, of practice, and experience. I still do everything I can to find out new ways to enhance my presentation skills. Now, moving forward, if I could, as we're beginning to move toward end, I do these monthly, these webinars. If you're, I see some familiar names, welcome back for those of you who are. Our next one is called Fostering IT Innovation, and it's going to be, they're always on Fridays, Friday, September 17th. I hope you can join us. The way to do it is if you go to our website, itmlinstitute.org, you'll see it says, there's a one that says registration. All of our classes and intermingled between them is the free webinars, which is actually, it's the same place you went to sign up for this one. Also is that if you want to hear a recording of this or other webinars that we've done, is if you go to the site and you sign up for free, you can. We have a free and sort of limited access to our growth library. Or IT Leadership Growth Library, to give the full name. You go there, you log in, you can see this again and others, as it's just sort of there as a way of giving back to the IT organization. Also is that should your IT organization say, gee, we could really use like 12, a turnkey IT program, give me a call. We do it. And as many of you probably know, and I think a couple of people on this have gone through them, the ITML Institute is also the governing body for 2 certifications in IT management. The first one is which they both start with IT, the Management and Leadership Professional, containing these topics. It's designed for people who are soon to be managers, tech leads, say IT managers with up to 3 or 4 years of IT management experience, or if you just look at it and say, well, I have lots of experience, but wow, I need those topics. The next one, the higher level, is the IT Management and Leadership Executive. This contains the 10 topics that are shown here. Both of these are run in 3 days, virtual, online, and it's basically 3 days of drinking through a fire hose. With this, when you join it, that also gives you access to our exam and the paid version of the growth library I mentioned earlier. Let me also say, I'm very excited to say, at the end of 2020, CIO.com, this is actually before I was writing for them, CIO.com included both the ITMLP and ITMLE as among their top 10 IT leadership programs. So from here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank you so much for spending, I guess that's 51 minutes of our time together.